Beneath the glittering steel and glass of Kansai International Airport, an invisible, decades-long war is being waged against gravity. It is a slow, relentless battle fought not with frantic alarms, but with cold, calculated hydraulic force. Deep inside the subterranean maintenance corridors of Terminal 1, the entire structure rests on a highly engineered grid of 900 massive columns. Because this artificial island is constantly settling into the soft ocean floor, these columns do not sit directly on the Earth. Instead, they are entirely detached, resting on a sophisticated mechanical jack-up system. Engineers continuously measure the floor for differential settlement, the phenomenon where one side of the terminal sinks slightly faster than the other. When a deviation is detected, workers deploy industrial hydraulic jacks to physically lift the colossal, dead weight of the active passenger terminal above. Once the hydraulic pressure raises the compromised column by a fraction of an inch, thick iron plates are inserted into the gap, locking the new elevation into place. This is not an emergency patch. It is an ongoing multi-million-dollar operational reality designed to prevent the terminal from slowly tearing its own framework apart. To understand why Japan built an airport with an intentional built-in self-destruct delay, we have to look at the macroeconomic climate of the late 20th century. Japan's economy was booming, and the existing inland airports were choking on their own traffic. Surrounded by dense urbanization and mountains, the only place left to expand was directly into the sea. But Osaka Bay hides a geotechnical nightmare. The seabed is not solid rock. It is a highly compressible, 20-meter-thick layer of Holocene marine clay sitting on top of hundreds of meters of alternating Pleistocene clay and gravel. It is essentially a giant underwater sponge. To see how a megaproject like this should be handled, we only have to look at Hong Kong's Chek Lap Kok Airport, built around the same time. Faced with a very similar problem, civil engineers in Hong Kong refused to gamble a macroeconomic hub on soft mud. Instead of leaving the unstable clay in place, they spent billions up front to deploy the world's largest dredging fleet. They physically excavated 13 million cubic meters of marine sludge, digging down 80 feet until they struck solid, unyielding granite bedrock. Only then did they backfill the ocean with over 150 million cubic meters of crushed stone, ensuring their island rested on an absolute permanent foundation. Kansai engineers took the opposite bet. Driven by budget constraints and extreme water depths, they opted not to dredge and instead drove millions of vertical sand drains into the seabed, attempting to squeeze the water out of the clay before dumping the heavy landfill on top. They gambled that they could accurately predict and manage the settlement over time. They lost. Since its inception, the original island has sunk roughly 38 to 45 feet. Kansai was locked into an expensive, endless cycle of sinking and mechanical adjustment. Yet, faced with this massive structural burden, officials aggressively pushed forward with Phase 2 in 2007. They needed a second runway to keep up with Asian logistics demands. But this required building even further out into the bay, in significantly deeper water over even softer clay. To build the Phase 2 expansion, engineers were forced to dump another 250 million cubic meters of earth. The second island is now subsiding at an even faster and more volatile rate than the first, dropping over 57 feet since the project began. But the structural sinkhole is only half the crisis. The constantly lowering elevation creates a terrifying vulnerability to extreme weather. When you build a multi-billion-dollar runway just a few feet above sea level, and that runway is actively sinking, the margin for error against storm surges eventually hits zero. In September 2018, this mathematical exposure was laid bare. Typhoon Jebi, packing winds of up to 134 miles per hour, slammed directly into Osaka Bay. The massive storm surge easily overwhelmed the sinking seawalls. Salt water violently flooded the active runways and poured into the subterranean infrastructure, severely cutting internal power. 3,000 terrified passengers and staff were trapped overnight inside a dark, flooding terminal. But the most devastating financial blow occurred offshore. Driven entirely out of control by the storm, a 2,591-ton heavy fuel tanker tore loose from its moorings and smashed violently into the single bridge connecting Kansai to the mainland. The grinding crunch of steel severed the airport entirely from Japan. It was a brutal wake-up call to the global logistics industry. A multi-billion-dollar island is worthless if a single access point collapses. The immense operational strain of recovering from disasters while fighting a daily subterranean war eventually forced a drastic financial restructuring. The debt was simply too toxic for the public ledger. In late 2015, the operating rights were sold off to a private consortium. This 44-year concession deal was an exercise in financial alchemy. it shifted $18 billion in crippling off-balance sheet liabilities away from the state, but moving public debt to private corporate ledgers does not alter the physical reality of a sinking island. Every dollar spent hydraulically jacking up a column or injecting stabilizing materials into the subsoil, or raising a seawall or repaving a warped runway, is a dollar permanently deleted from their profit margin. So why not just abandon the facility and stop the financial bleeding? Because Kansai is the absolute critical logistics artery for high-value exports across Asia. It single-handedly processes a massive percentage of Japan's strict temperature-controlled biotechnology supplies, advanced pharmaceuticals, and integrated logic circuits. Shutting down this specific macro bottleneck would immediately and violently disrupt the global technology and medical supply chains. The world literally cannot afford to let Kansai sink. To offset the endless subterranean maintenance, the landing fees at Kansai have historically been some of the absolute highest in the entire world. Global cargo carriers are charged a massive premium just to access the sinking tarmac. Those exorbitant freight penalties are quietly and systemically baked directly into the final retail pricing structure. That excessive fee translates directly to the final retail price of a motherboard or specialized medication shipped to Europe or North America. You are unknowingly paying a hidden micro-tax every time you upgrade your electronics just to fund the hydraulic jacks sitting at the bottom of Osaka Bay. The private consortium, the Japanese government, and the massive global tech industry are all locked in a mutual financial dependency. Kansai International Airport remains a modern engineering marvel, sustained only by sheer financial brute force. It serves as a stark reminder that we can force nature into temporary submission, provided we are willing to pay the ultimate price. The ultimate question isn't whether we have the engineering capability to conquer the ocean, but whether our supply chains can survive the financial weight we attach to them.